Welcome everybody to New Heart, New World. I'm Rasika Manjari, and today I'm going to talk about the three modes of material nature. Now, I don't think anyone would argue that naturally we all want to be happy. Whatever we understand that to mean, we're all seeking happiness. However, we have one little problem. And that is that even though we may be fervently seeking happiness high and low, happiness may not be seeking us. And then we have another little problem, which is that even though we may experience happiness and taste it and get glimpses of it every now and then, or many times, that happiness is rarely long-lasting, let alone everlasting. And to expand our problem list a little bit further, do we really know what happiness is? I mean, we seem to be so bad at it. So a definition might come in handy. Now, of our vast and varied experiences on planet Earth, as individuals and collectively, eternal happiness is not one of the more common experiences. So a helpful way to understand the nature of happiness and how to make ourselves happy, I guess, is through the lens of Bhakti Yoga, specifically through the concept of the three modes of material nature. Now, these three modes are, as the name suggests, material in nature. So they are manifestations of the material energy of Krishna or God. Krishna is known in the Bhakti Yoga teachings. So Krishna has three main energies, and they are the spiritual energy, the material energy, and the in-between energy. Now, the in-between energy is us as living beings, because we are both spiritual in nature, in our true essence, but we are also material in that we're not material, but we are influenced by the material energy. And so that puts us in a between category of energies of the Lord. And that material energy that influences us and that shapes our experiences from day to day is the three modes of material nature, manifestations of the material energy. So the Bhagavad Gita, or the Song of God, as it's also known in English, is a core foundational text in the teachings of Bhakti Yoga, and it is spoken by Lord Krishna himself. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, we learn that the three modes of nature are termed the mode of goodness, the mode of passion, and the mode of ignorance. So these modes are different in nature in that they have different characteristics that make each of them unique. So they are all manifestations, however, of the material energy, which is known as Maya in the Bhakti Yoga philosophy, in the Vedic literature. So these influences of Maya, or the material nature, are designed to influence the in-between energy, which is us as the living beings, who are truly spiritual in nature, however, have that tendency to be influenced by the world in which we live. So that's the job of the three material modes, is to influence us at that level, at the material level. So in essence, they act like the puppeteers, and we, in essence, are the puppets. However, we have to remember that sounds like a very disempowering picture there, puppeteers and puppets. However, we have to understand that we always, as human beings, being spiritual in nature, have free will. Now, that free will is limited to a degree by the influence of the three modes of material nature. There is a certain aspect there that is not within our control. However, we have an element of free will, and I will come to that in a moment. So just to explain a little bit the three modes of material nature, so each one individually will start from the mode of goodness. So the mode of goodness is characterized by someone who has a regulated lifestyle. They may get up early in the morning, they tend to look after themselves, look after their bodies, have a very balanced view of life in this world, and don't have any extremes of behavior, activity, or thought. And they generally tend to be content and satisfied within themselves to a certain degree. Now, the mode of passion is the mode that tends to drive our societies, mainly today. It tends to drive the big cities and the intense activity that we find on our planet at many levels. So this is characterized by hard work and extreme endeavor to get that which we think will give us happiness. So we learn from the societal values that if we work hard and do our duty in terms of our work, then we'll get the rewards for that, like for example a new house or a new car or stable income and the enjoyments of life. So this tends to be the characteristic of the mode of passion. Now, the mode of ignorance is where one is not necessarily acting within their best self-interest. So they may not have regard for themselves, let alone others, and they may act in ways that may be detrimental to their health, mental health and physical health, and they may not have much regard for anything or anyone besides meeting their immediate sensory needs. So they all have their place in our lives, and the thing to remember is that these three modes never work uniquely in any one person. We are generally a combination of these three modes to different degrees. So everyone is a mixture of these modes, and one of them may tend to predominate more than the other in any individual. However, most of us on the planet today are dominated by the modes of passion and ignorance. And these are the things that tend to drive us and influence our behaviors and activities and also our experience from day to day. So, as I said, our experiences, our behaviors and our choices and even our thoughts from moment to moment are the work of the modes of the material nature. So these are the material manifestations of the influence on us as human beings. So even though we are born into these lives with a certain combination of these modes that are naturally imprinted into our, I guess you could call it genetic code or our karma, there are certain ways in which we tend to behave even from an early age, and that can characterize our personalities and interactions with others in the world as we progress through life. However, it's also important to remember that at any moment we can exercise our free will. We can change. We don't have to be limited by the particular modes of nature or the combination of the modes of nature that we are born into. There is always the potential for change and to move beyond any particular mode that we find ourselves predominantly being influenced by. So with this in mind, we can explore a little bit about the Bhakti Yoga definition of happiness. So the Bhakti Yoga definition of happiness is where we endeavour to elevate our consciousness to the point where we're in touch with our spiritual identities, our spiritual selves. So moving beyond the modes of material nature into who we truly are as spirit souls. Because when we're in touch with that true identity, that connects us to love of the highest order, of divine love. And of course, that is where happiness lies, in the experience of true love, spiritual love, love of the highest order, love between the spirit soul and the supreme super soul, or Krishna, or God, as he's also known, as well as many infinite other names. So if this is the definition of happiness, and we have a choice to move beyond any particular mode that influences us, then, you know, the next question might be, well, how do we achieve this? How is that even possible? Now, I mentioned earlier that we all have an element of free will. So the three modes of nature are influencing us, no doubt, and there is an element of experiences that are beyond our control in terms of how they influence us. However, that element of free will that we do retain, that we always have as spiritual identities, is the ticket to allow us to transcend the modes once and for all. So if you've had it with the three material modes of nature and feeling compelled to act in certain ways, because this is what the material modes of nature in essence are. They compel us to act in certain ways so that it shapes our personality and it becomes characteristic of who we are. And sometimes we may even blame the modes of material nature for behaviors, actions, and even thoughts that we feel we don't have any control over. And the term, "the devil made me do it," is actually a concise way of describing how these modes sometimes make us feel. Sometimes behaviors that we don't really want to enact actually are expressed in our activities from day to day by the strong influences of the modes of material nature. However, we must remember that we always have responsibility for our thoughts, our behaviors, our actions, and the outcomes of all of those. So we always hold responsibility for them, because at some level we are allowed to choose. We have the option of choice out of the restrictions and limitations of these three modes. So even though it's tempting to say, well, the devil made me do it, and to excuse ourselves for any behavior that might impact negatively on others or our environment, that is no way out. There is an underlying sense of responsibility we all have as human beings, as the spiritual identities that we truly are. Because really, ultimately, the modes are just a form of covering. They're a form of a disguise, if you like, of our true identities, until we tap into the true spiritual nature of our personalities, until we come in touch with that spiritual aspect of who we are. Then these modes tend to cover us and act as a bit of a disguise as to who we really are. So the Bhakti Yoga philosophy, lifestyle and practice enables us to move beyond these modes, and actually it allows us to elevate ourselves through the modes. So ultimately through the mode of goodness and then beyond into transcendence. Because the ultimate goal of elevating our consciousness is not necessarily to get purely to the mode of goodness, because ultimately, whichever of the modes are influencing us, even if it's mostly the mode of goodness, we still remain entrapped within that material consciousness, within the dictates of the material energy, which is the three material modes. So until we move beyond that, until we contact our true spiritual selves, then we remain in material consciousness. So the idea is to transcend that material consciousness, and the way out is Bhakti Yoga. So when Bhakti Yoga is practiced, then naturally what happens is the consciousness is purified and elevated, and we automatically develop all good qualities, which takes us without effort to the mode of goodness anyway. And then from that platform of the mode of goodness, it's much easier to elevate beyond that, beyond the limitations of the material nature, through into transcendence, which is basically contact with our spiritual natures and the divine love that is on offer when we have reconnected with that reality of our true selves. So once we contact that love and we can make that connection, then happiness is ours, and it's never going to go away. It's an eternal form of happiness, happiness of the eternal kind. So our problem list may be a little heavy, that we started with at the beginning of this discussion, but there is a solution list that helps balance out that happiness equation that we mentioned earlier on. So the solution list is that true happiness is available to us all. We just need to know where to look for it. So society at the moment, the world in which we live, it's not necessarily so conducive to spiritual development and the encouragement of the development of spiritual values and principles. So when we, in our search for happiness, which we're mostly on, most of us on this quest for eternal happiness, we rarely know even where to look, because it's not so readily on offer, at every street corner. So if we know where to look, then the happiness that is really ours as our birthright is more readily available to us. And of course, Bhakti Yoga is a key starting point to this happiness that we all seek. It's the key to unlock the door to the love and happiness that will ultimately liberate us from the chains, if you like, of the material modes of nature. And second on our problem list, our solution list actually to the problems that we mentioned earlier, is that there are tangible and proven ways of getting happy and staying happy. So we just have to remember that there is a way that we actually can achieve it, and it is something that is possible for everyone. And also the third on our solution list is that, the ancient sages that compiled the scriptures or the Bhakti Yoga philosophy and texts knew the secrets of being happy and staying happy. And this information is fortunately available to all of us today. So with that in mind, we can take up the philosophy and practice and lifestyle of Bhakti Yoga and make it ours, because it is ours. It is the natural tendency for a human being is to grow spiritually. And when we embrace that aspect of us, when we take the high road and not the low road, then we are on our way to the happiness that we seek. Because ultimately that choice that we have, that limited choice, but choice nonetheless, that free will that we all have at some level, is about choosing whether to go left or right, up or down, high or low. So we can choose this, and ultimately therein our decision lies. And in the context of the three modes of material nature, we can choose to elevate upwards through the modes and out of them altogether into transcendence, or we can choose to stay where we are, or even devolve into lower aspects of those modes of material nature, and that will reflect in lifetimes to come. So these sages that I mentioned earlier, who know the secrets of being happy and staying happy, one of the key aspects of this connection with our spiritual selves and with the supreme divine self, Krishna, or God as he's also known, as well as infinite other names as I mentioned earlier, the way to connect and to take that step towards transcendence is part of the Bhakti Yoga lifestyle. And the key aspect of this lifestyle and practice is the chanting of the Maha Mantra. Now, I've mentioned it many other times in previous videos, so you may already be familiar with the Maha Mantra, and you may like to chant along as I chant it now. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So this mantra is very, very useful. It's a very useful tool to liberate ourselves from the chains of material nature and to take us to levels of experience and understanding that we would have never even imagined for ourselves, because those kind of experiences are not readily available on the material plane. It doesn't mean that we, start floating in the clouds or, treading on air. No, we still live in this world and we still function and interact with each other and do our duties and our daily activities. However, there is another level to it. We experience a different plane of reality which is separate from the three material modes of nature. It's separate from those influences that seem to compel us to behave in certain ways. It's completely independent of that, and we can tap into it at any time. When we chant this Maha Mantra, and also when we engage in any of the practices of Bhakti Yoga. So if you would like to find out more, please check out my website. It's newheart-newworld.com. There you'll find a lot more information about the practice and lifestyle of Bhakti Yoga, and also where to find other resources that may point you in the right direction and help you along your Bhakti Yoga journey. So get happy and stay happy through Bhakti Yoga, which is the yoga of divine love. Now, if you've had a memorable encounter with the three modes of material nature, meaning that you felt compelled at some time of your life to behave in a certain way that seemed beyond your control at some level, and if you feel happy to share it, please comment below, because sometimes experience and learning from each other, we start to put that philosophy into it starts to take shape and actually takes on a certain real meaning in our lives, where we can identify with each other's experiences and then also apply them to our own as a way of learning and understanding how we can ultimately free ourselves once and for all from the three modes of material nature. So I will be creating many more videos like this on the secrets or not so secrets of Bhakti Yoga. So please stay tuned. So until then, I wish you all well. Bye for now.